The iron tastes like blood where it presses against her lips. Claudia Severina is 26 years old, and she can feel the metal collar cutting into the soft flesh of her throat, can smell the ancient stone and fresh urine that defines these underground chambers. You can hear through the walls the rhythmic grunting of men training for death, while she waits to learn how she will be used before her own death arrives. She was, until 6 days ago, the daughter of Senator Marcus Claudius Severus, a woman raised in a villa overlooking the Bay of Naples, educated by Greek tutors, betrothed to a man whose family controlled half the olive trade in the western provinces. Now she kneels on damp stone in the hypogeum, the warren of cells and tunnels beneath the Flavian amphitheater, her silk stola exchanged for a rough shift that barely covers her body, her jeweled rings replaced by iron shackles that connect her wrists to the collar that marks her as property of the arena. Around her, in cells that stretch into darkness in both directions, other women wait in similar positions. Some weep, some pray. Some have gone silent in ways that suggest they have already departed from their bodies, leaving behind flesh that will serve whatever purposes the arena requires. A man approaches her cell. He is perhaps 30 years old, with the build of someone who has spent years perfecting the art of killing massive shoulders, scarred forearms, the particular grace of a trained fighter that makes every movement seem deliberate. His face is handsome in a brutal way, features that might have been attractive before they were broken and reset by combat. He wears the simple tunic of a gladiator, but the gold band on his arm marks him as a champion, one of the elite fighters whose victories have earned them privileges that common gladiators do not receive. He stops before her cell, his eyes moving over her body with the assessment of someone evaluating merchandise. "This is the senator's daughter?" he asks someone behind him. "Claudia Severina," a second voice confirms, "condemned for poisoning her husband. The execution is scheduled for the Ludi Romani, 7 days from now." 7 days. The gladiator smiles, and the expression transforms his face into something predatory. "That's a long time. What's the assignment?" "Standard disposition. She's yours if you want her. The Lanista approved the transfer this morning." The gladiator, she needs to know his name, needs to understand who controls her fate steps closer to the bars. He reaches through, his fingers finding her chin, tilting her face upward so he can examine her more closely. "Quality," he says. "Not like the usual trash they send down here. This one was actually someone. She was engaged to Quintus Petronius, the shipping family. I know who Petronius is. I killed his cousin in the arena 3 years ago." The gladiator releases her chin. "What's your name, champion?" "I am Claudia Severina, daughter of—" "I know who your father was. I'm asking what you want to be called. Down here, who you were doesn't matter. Only who you're going to be for the next 7 days." She meets his eyes. She will not look away. She will not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear, even though fear is coiling in her stomach like something alive. "What is your name?" she asks instead of answering. The question surprises him. Condemned prisoners do not typically ask questions. They weep, they beg, they bargain, but they do not demand information from their captors, as if the exchange were between equals. "Titus alias Magnus," he says. "They call me Magnus the Destroyer. I have killed 47 men in this arena. I have never lost a fight, and for the next 7 days you belong to me." "I belong to no one." Magnus laughs. It is not a pleasant sound. "You belonged to your father until he sold you to Petronius. You belonged to Petronius until you killed him. Now you belong to the arena, and the arena has given you to me. That's how property works. It passes from hand to hand until it's used up. I did not kill my husband." "I don't care if you did or didn't. The courts say you did. That's why you're here instead of in your pretty villa." He turns to the guard behind him. "Open the cell. I'll take her to my quarters now." The guard produces keys. The cell door swings open. Magnus enters, his bulk filling the small space, his presence overwhelming in a way that makes the stone walls feel closer. "You can walk with me, or I can drag you," he says. "Walking is easier on both of us. Dragging is more fun for me. Choose." She chooses to walk. What you are about to learn has been systematically erased from the histories that celebrate Roman gladiatorial combat as spectacle and sport. The historians who documented the games focused on the fighters, their victories, their techniques, the crowds who cheered their triumphs. They recorded the construction of the great amphitheaters, the logistics of the beast hunts, the political purposes that the games served. They created a narrative of entertainment, of competition, of the Roman genius for organizing violence into manageable forms. But beneath every arena was a world they chose not to describe. The hypogeum, the underground chambers where animals, prisoners, and equipment were held before appearing on the sands above. A world of cells and cages, of holding areas and preparation rooms, of all the infrastructure required to produce the spectacles that Rome demanded. And in that world, condemned prisoners waited. Not just for their deaths, those were scheduled, predictable, the final moments of lives already forfeit, but for what happened in the days and weeks before those deaths, when they were property of the arena and available to anyone with sufficient authority to claim them. Tonight you will learn what happened in those underground chambers. You will learn about the gladiators, who earned the right to use condemned prisoners, the hierarchies that determined who received what privileges, the systematic availability of women who had been stripped of all legal protection. You will learn about Claudia Severina, who was condemned for a murder she did not commit, who found herself beneath the arena in the possession of a champion fighter, who spent 7 days navigating a world designed to destroy everything she was before her scheduled execution. Subscribe if you want to understand the full horror of Roman arena culture. Comment below telling me where you are watching from, because the gladiators above the sand were only part of the story. What happened below the sand, what happened to the women waiting in those cells, is what Rome's historians chose to forget. But before I tell you what Magnus did to Claudia in his quarters, what she witnessed in those underground chambers, and how she found a way to survive what should have been unsurvivable, I need to take you back. I need to explain how the hypogeum functioned, what condemned prisoners represented within its economy, and why gladiators were given access to women who were already sentenced to die. Because you cannot understand what Claudia faced without understanding the system that made her suffering useful. The hypogeum was a city beneath a city. Every major Roman arena had one, an underground complex that served as staging area, storage facility, and holding pen for everything the games required. The Flavian Amphitheater's hypogeum was the largest and most sophisticated, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers that covered the entire footprint of the arena floor above. The infrastructure was impressive by any standard. Elevators, powered by human labor, could lift cages of animals or platforms of prisoners directly onto the sand through trapdoors that made them seem to appear from nowhere. Tunnels connected different sections, allowing animals and people to be moved without appearing in public until the moment of their debut. Storage rooms held costumes, weapons, scenery, all the props required for the theatrical executions that Roman crowds particularly enjoyed. But the hypogeum was more than infrastructure. It was a society with its own hierarchies, its own economy, its own rules, that did not quite match the rules of the world above. At the top of this society were the gladiators themselves. Not all gladiators, but the elite fighters whose victories had earned them status that their slave or criminal origins should have denied them. A champion like Magnus had more practical power within the hypogeum than most free citizens had anywhere. He ate better than the urban poor, lived in private quarters, commanded respect from guards and officials who technically outranked him, and he had access to condemned prisoners. This access was not officially sanctioned, No law specified that gladiators could use female prisoners awaiting execution. But the practice was universal, understood by everyone involved, woven into the fabric of arena culture so thoroughly that it was simply how things worked. The logic was straightforward. Condemned prisoners were dead already. Their executions were scheduled, their fates sealed. What happened to them before those executions was considered irrelevant to legal or moral concerns. They were property of the arena, to be disposed of as arena authorities saw fit. And arena authorities saw fit to reward successful gladiators with access to that property. The rewards served multiple purposes. They motivated gladiators to fight harder, to win more spectacularly, to provide the entertainment that justified the enormous expense of the games. They created loyalty among fighters who might otherwise resent their captivity. Even gladiators who were technically slaves or prisoners themselves had power over someone. And they disposed of a problem that arena administrators would otherwise have to manage: what to do with condemned prisoners during the days or weeks between their arrival and their scheduled deaths. Female prisoners were particularly valuable within this economy. Male prisoners might be given to gladiators for training purposes, targets to practice on, opponents who could not effectively fight back. But female prisoners served different functions. They provided sexual access, certainly, but also domestic service, entertainment, companionship, whatever the gladiator who claimed them desired. The arrangement was understood to be temporary. The women would die eventually, on schedule, in whatever manner had been assigned for their executions. But, until that scheduled moment, they belonged to whoever had claimed them, and what happened during that interim was no one's concern. This was the system that now controlled Claudia Severina. This was the world she was learning to navigate. This was the context within which she had 7 days to find a way to survive. Magnus's quarters were larger than she had expected, a suite of rooms rather than a single cell, with furniture that suggested comfort rather than mere utility. There was a bed with actual linens, a table with chairs, shelves holding what appeared to be books and personal items. It looked almost like a proper dwelling rather than a chamber in an underground prison. "Surprised?" Magnus asked, noting her examination. "Champions have privileges. I've won 47 fights. That buys better accommodations. It looks like a home. It is a home, the only home I've had since I was sold to the ludus at 14. He gestured to a chair. "Sit. We should talk before anything else happens." She sat, uncertain what to make of the invitation to converse. She had expected immediate assault, immediate demonstration of the power he held over her. Talk was unexpected. Magnus poured wine from a jug on the table, actual wine, not the watered vinegar that slaves received, and placed a cup before her. "You said you didn't kill your husband," he began. "Tell me about that. Why do you care?" "I don't, particularly. But I'm curious. You're not like the usual women they send down here. You have presence. You talk like you expect to be listened to. That suggests either you're stupid, which I don't think you are, or you believe you have something worth saying." Claudia studied him, trying to understand what he wanted. Information, perhaps. Leverage. Something he could use for purposes she could not yet identify. But talking was better than the alternative. Talking gave her time. "Quintus Petronius was my husband," she said. "Our marriage was arranged by our families for commercial purposes. My father's political connections for his family's shipping wealth. I did not love him, and he did not love me, but we were learning to work together. We had been married for 18 months. And then he died. He died at a dinner party. Poison in his wine. I was accused because I had been seen arguing with him earlier that day, because I had asked our cook about certain herbs for stomach complaints, because I was the convenient explanation for a death that someone wanted, explained quickly. Who wanted it explained? His brother Gaius, who inherited everything when Quintus died childless. who had been arguing with Quintus about the division of family assets.